your questions and comments. So it would be great that if this event also would be a bit dialogical. So it's not just me talking, hopefully also you participating somehow. But hey, before we start, I would like all of you who are students here to raise your hands. Who are students of this school? Great. And are there teachers present? Anyone or staff in the school? Okay, 2 people. And then raise hands, all of you who are not from this school or here. So people from the Nordic Council, Finnish Embassy, and you were all from the city administration. Okay, so we have a really nice combination of people here, and let's get started. Okay, just a little bit still of my background. As I said that I'm a researcher in political philosophy, I have read several books, and the most recent ones that are also translated in English are more or less about dialogue. And I in my work as a researcher, but also a person who is training like people and professionals, I try to combine theoretical understanding of democracy and theoretical understanding of dialogue with this very practical approach, how to do it in real life. And there are some of my books, and I think these slides that I'm going to show, I will send them also to the school. So if you want to have them afterwards, I hope that the school can provide them for the students also. So okay, this is something of my background. I will explain a bit more concretely later how I work and what we are doing in more general level in the Finnish society with dialogue. But I think we could also start by you having a small discussion. So if there's somebody close to you that you can talk to, or if you're sitting by yourself, you can think your own thoughts and maybe write down. But my question to you is that why do you think, I think there can be many different answers, why do you think democracy and democratic societies need good discussions? Why? Why? Because there might be many reasons for that. So just like take a couple of minutes, turn to somebody close to you or write down and think by yourself, why do you think we need good discussions, especially in democratic societies? Couple of minutes. Talk, please. I'll give you 2 more minutes to discuss, and then I want to hear something, what you have been talking. 2 more minutes. Okay, thank you. You can finish your last sentences. And it would be nice to hear at least from some of you what you have been discussing. What did you think? Okay, there. Yeah. So I'll repeat something for the online audience also. You emphasized that democracy is based on discussions and on dialogue, because we need to understand, if I understand correctly, we need to understand each other and be heard and listen so we can make informed decisions. Right. Okay. Thank you. What else? Was there some other things that came up in your mind? Why we need good discussions in democracy? Yes, please. Yeah. So you emphasize that it's not just for the good decisions; it's also for the people in general. If I understand that, in democracy we are kind of everybody should be in the same boat. So everybody should at least have the possibility to be involved in whatever things we are doing in the society together. Yes, a very important aspect. I also agree very much with that. Something else, maybe some third idea. Here, please. Yeah. And I think, as you said, that these different points of view that can come up in a discussion is needed. And I also think that it's even more crucial probably nowadays than before, because we have so many difficult and complex questions, as this corona crisis has also showed, that we really need to look at it from many different points of view in order to know what should be done and even to understand what's going on. How can we solve those things? Or even just to know what people are thinking about it in general. Okay, great. You kind of already painted the picture why dialogue is also important. And I want to already say that when I come to the concept of dialogue a bit later, but I want to say that one of the important things for me in understanding the need of good discussions is also that we In a democratic society, we need different kinds of discussions. We need dialogue, but we also need debating, and we need negotiating. And a little bit later, I'm gonna explain how I see the differences between these different forms of communication. And I think we need all of them to make the democratic society to function well. Great. So, I say something about my understanding of democracy, and it's not just me. This is something that we can see this kind of way of thinking about democracy already in the ancient Greece, where democracy was initially invented in the antiquity. But already in ancient Greece, they understood that democracy doesn't only mean a system of government. This is, I suppose, the most common understanding of democracy, which usually in many people's minds is connected to voting and changing governments and this kind of a majority decision making. So those are some of the aspects of democracy as a system of government. But from very early on, in ancient Athens especially, they understood that this kind of a form of government where the majority is deciding things and lots of people are involved in the decision-making processes, you also need to have a democracy as a way of life, not just something that you do in politics. It needs to be something that you do in your everyday life. How you treat other people, how you discuss together in other situations, not just in political situations, but also maybe in workplaces, hobbies, associations, lots of different parts of your everyday life. And this democratic way of life is a way of living together that tries to maximize the equality of all people. And it also tries to maximize the freedom of each individual, that everybody could feel as free as possible. And when you are maximizing equality and freedom, you try to combine these individuals' different abilities, their skills, their knowledge, their capabilities, to make the whole society to flourish. And so it's not just, I think there are several reasons why this kind of a democracy as a way of life is important. One of the reasons is that if we don't have these skills in everyday life, it would be very absurd to think that we could have them in the political decision-making also. But also the understanding is that this kind of a way of living together in schools, in workplaces, in associations, in business life, wherever, also brings out creative, good solutions in different situations. Because individuals are different and they have different capabilities. And in order to make the best possible outcomes in whatever they're doing, they need to be able to combine those individual talents in a creative way. So this democratic way of life is taught, it's assumed to be a way of making that happen. And also, as I mentioned, that this kind of a way of living this democratic life is also something that we don't naturally know how to do. We need to learn it. And we need to learn it by participating in democratic societies and in different democratic communities. So bit by bit, when we practice this, we also learn how to do it. And as I said before, one of the main reasons behind it, that why it needs to be learned, is that it's not easy for people usually to treat each other as equals and try to maximize each other's liberties and freedoms. Because in many situations, it would be so much easier if there would be somebody who is the authority and decides what is done. And especially as we see now in a crisis situations, it is very, very, of course, we sometimes need that there is a leader who decides. But if we want to involve people in a more broader way, and there are lots of emotions involved, for example, it is very, very demanding to kind of keep up this democratic way of life among people. So it's a real skill that also needs to be learned by participating. And that is probably the reason why all democracies have always emphasized education so much. That we need education that would give these democratic skills to people so they could then act and function in the society in a way that supports democracy and makes it flourish also. And I think, and my understanding, that dialogue is the core of this democratic way of life. This way of having certain kind of discussions as equals and maximizing individual freedoms. And I think also it's one of the very, very important aspects of dialogue is that it builds trust between people. And some of you said in the beginning that very well that we need discussions also so that people feel that they are involved. And I think that usually is something that builds trust between people. When you have the feeling that you, as an individual person in your society, no matter is it a school or a town or a state, when you have this feeling that you are somehow recognized and taken seriously, no matter what your opinions are, but you are taken seriously and people try to learn from you and at least somehow understand you, you start to feel that you are valuable for the community as an individual being. And I think this is one of the most biggest things that we should try to bring to different situations in our lives in democratic societies, that people would feel that they are valuable because not only because they are similar to other people, but they're also valuable because they are different. They are somehow unique, and being unique means that you have this different, unique perspective to things, and that might be useful also for other people. So this is how I see why dialogue is so relevant to this democracy as a way of life, but also as a system of government. Is there something you want to ask or comment about this way of understanding democracy? Does it make sense to you to see democracy from this point of view? Yes? Yes. Yeah, yeah. And also, I think that that's such a great point of view. And I also think that it needs to be something, it needs to start from something very concrete. It doesn't necessarily need to be that you need to have the power to make changes how your country works, but it maybe starts from your neighborhood, your home, your school, that what do you think about these common issues, these common things that we have here has meaning. We are interested in that. It can provide us a better understanding how to run things and how to create a new future or whatever. And I again say that I think it's because there are lots of different ways how do you feel to be part of community, and I think one of these ways is that the community accepts you if you are kind of doing what everybody does and staying, in the line with others. But I think in democracy, people should have the experience that you can belong to this community and you are valuable because you are different also. I think we need similarities, but of course, in democracy, we kind of cherish and value individual differences. And of course, that is challenging. It doesn't come easily, and people don't automatically feel that they are valuable because they are different. It needs to be somehow proved or at least shown in practice that your point of view matters. Okay, is there something else you want to comment on this kind of idea of democracy also as a way of life? Good, then we can go a bit forwards. Okay. I need to. So, what is dialogue? I think in general the word dialogue has this kind of everyday meaning, which is just can be a discussion where there is two or more people, and at least in the Finnish media, when people are saying that we need dialogue, it has a bit more specific meaning, and then it usually means that we need to have a good discussion. But again, I don't think any kind of good discussion necessarily means that it's a dialogue. So what I have tried with my colleagues and from a previous literature about dialogue, I have tried to kind of narrow down a bit more concrete and more definite understanding what is dialogue. And the basic definition that I usually use when I'm talking about dialogue is that dialogue is a discussion that aims specifically at understanding. That we come together and try to have a discussion just in order to increase our understanding. So for me, dialogue is always a learning situation. I'm having discussion with people, I'm having this dialogue in order to learn something. And I think there are three main dimensions in learning and understanding in dialogue. First of all, we usually have some topic. We are talking about something. We might be talking about how we want to solve some situation in our community, in our school, in our workplace, maybe in some organization, or maybe how we want to arrange our training in our football team. We could have a dialogue about that. We have some topic. We have wonderful documents of dialogues from the ancient Greek and Rome, and those topics are topics of those dialogues are these big values of human life, like courage or justice or love. And so we can have also dialogues about very, very big topics. But I think the common thing is that we really try to understand better what is this topic. But at the same time, we are also trying to understand each other. And I think this makes dialogue very, very different from many other ways of discussing. Because in a dialogical situation, we are not just only trying to understand the topic better, but we are also try to be interested in the ways that how other people see the same topic differently. Because when we realize that we see things somehow differently, that's also always a possibility to learn something. Learn something from the topic because somebody sees something else in that topic, but also learn something about the other person. Oh, I didn't realize that, Rita, you see this in a different way than I do. And when we are also learning about and trying to understand better other people, we hopefully also get a better self-understanding. So dialogue is, for me at least, always a situation where I'll try to understand myself better. And that can only happen when I realize that I'm different from others. So these three dimensions are the main reasons why I think we should have dialogues in the first place. And I think it's very crucial and important to see how dialogue is different from these other forms of human communication, which I also think are very important for democracy. I think we need debates, and in debates, we are trying to find the best argument. We are like having a very, hopefully, polite discussions where we argue a lot in order to find out what are the best arguments in this case. And that's debating. Then there are lots of situations in all human communities and in society in general where we need to negotiate. And negotiating is aiming at some sort of agreement. It usually involves compromises, and we need to negotiate many things in order to live together peacefully. And then I think in some cases we need this consensus, where we try to discuss as long as we agree on everything, that we have this unanimity with ourselves. And I think, as I said, we need these different ways of having discussions in different situations, but I think dialogue, in a way, is the basis for having good debates and having good negotiations and having consensus sometimes. Because if we don't understand each other well enough, we can't really have good debates. We might, for example, have different meanings for the words that we are using. So debate doesn't really make sense if I mean something very different when I'm talking about justice or when I'm talking about efficiency or safety, or, you know, we might have very, very different understanding of the words even. So we kind of need first dialogue in order to make sure that, okay, now we understand each other well enough, so maybe now it would be reasonable to start the debate. And also, if we want to make good agreements, if we want to have a fruitful negotiation, it's very important that we understand what is relevant to the other people, what are their values, what are they aiming at in different situations, in order to make suggestions about these agreements that we are aiming at. And also, I think it goes for this consensus also, that if we really need to be able to agree on something altogether, we need the understanding. We need and in those cases, I think we also need the trust, and we need the experience for people that they are valued and heard if we are aiming at consensus. So this is like the basic understanding and definition that I have about dialogue and how it's different from the other forms of discussions that we need in democracies. Do you want to say something about this? How does this sound to you? Any? Is there something that when you look at especially the definition of dialogue, does that make sense to you? And can you grasp somehow that how this is different from those other ways of discussing? And I think one crucial thing, at least in Finland, where I train lots of people, is that I suppose most people have some sort of experiences of having dialogues, but at least in Finnish school system, which otherwise is quite good, we are not really learned how to practice dialogue. We are learned a little bit, they are teaching us a little bit to debate, but I have never been in a classroom situation where somebody has taught me that, okay, let's have a dialogue. And the dialogue is different from other ways of discussing. So I think we are in a situation, and I think this goes to most democratic societies, that we are in a situation that even though we would need dialogue, people don't necessarily know how to do it or understand and can agree that this is a situation where we actually don't want to debate and don't want to have a negotiation yet, but that we need dialogue first. So I think this kind of intellectual understanding, what is dialogue and how it's different, is also very, very important. Okay, let's go a bit forward to the practical aspects of dialogue. As was mentioned in the beginning of the lecture, we are in a situation not just because of COVID, but I think lots of other reasons are there also, that we really need dialogue probably more than even before. And I think there are some of these reasons here mentioned. We have so many complex issues in our society. Of course, something like climate change and ecological crisis in general. And we do also have a crisis of democracy going on around the world, that people have lost their faith in many, even many well-functioning democracies, of this way of governing and this way of living together. And then we have a really heated discussion, partially obviously because of the internet and social media, but in many these very complex things like the COVID crisis usually bring up lots of emotions, and people see things from a very different point of view. So the discussions tend to become very heated. And if we want to do something, try to do something about it, I think we kind of we need to be quite active, because if we let this happen, all these things just happen and get worse, it becomes more and more difficult somehow to come back together and start these more constructive discussions. And for several years in Finland, it's been very interesting to follow and participate in this dialogical movement. It is something that has had already a bit longer history. It started in the 80s, and that some people, some professionals began very interested in dialogical practices. First, in my understanding, we started partially with, especially our previous president, Martti Ahtisaari, who won a Nobel Prize. He was interested in international conflict mediation. And he and his staff used a lot of dialogue in these conflict situations. But that was in different countries around the world. But we also had an interesting way of using dialogue in psychiatric care developed by Professor Jaakko Seikkula and his team in very far north in Finland, in Lapland. They started to use dialogue as a way of treating psychosis and schizophrenia, and got really good results. And it was basically called open dialogue, and the idea was just that when somebody got very severe psychiatric problems, they gathered the people who belonged to his life together, just sit in the circle with the staff in the hospital and having a dialogue about, okay, how we are in this situation, how we understand each other, how we understand these delusional things that some people might experience. And everybody had a voice in those dialogues, and even the person who was mad at the moment. And it really seemed to help in many situations. And now this open dialogue treatment is used in 25 different countries, at least at the moment, according to Jaakko. And then we had also anticipation dialogues in social work, developed by my very good colleague, Professor Tom Arnchill. And my company was mostly involved in developing dialogical supervision, which is a way of helping different professionals to reflect on their work, which I already showed you that we wrote a book about that as well. But within the couple of recent years, I was involved in a project called Timeout, which I will tell you something about more. It was initiated by the Finnish Innovation Fund. It's a government-funded organization where we try to create tools for everybody, no matter what profession and no matter what part of society. For them, we try to create some tools how to have good dialogues. And now we have a Timeout Foundation that is kind of spreading this Timeout model. We also initiated Finnish national dialogues. so-called lockdown dialogues, even though Finland didn't have that bad lockdown during the corona crisis. So we invited lots of different individuals and people just to arrange dialogues, mostly online, to gather people and give them the good space to have dialogues, just to share their experiences. And then we were collaborating with the Finnish government, and we wrote summaries of those dialogues that and made them public, that would describe these different kind of emotions and thoughts and things that people had in their mind in the different times of the crisis. And so far we had almost 300 national dialogues and involving around 100 organizations. And so at the moment we are in a situation that hundreds of organizations have started using dialogue, and we have tens of thousands of participants in different dialogues all around in the society. So we are in a very interesting situation in Finland at the moment, because I can honestly say that now dialogue is being practiced in kindergartens, but also on the government level, and almost everything there in between. Of course, it's not like that every Finnish person is constantly sitting in a dialogue, but we are bigger and bigger group all the time who are kind of promoting dialogue in different areas of the society. Okay, so this is the practical side. We created because, as I said before, that it's not so easy for people to start to have dialogues, especially if there is lots of tensions in groups and in communities. So they need some help. And one of the help that we have provided is the timeout model. You can, each of you, if you want, you can check the timeout model. There is a timeout webpage where there's also all the tools and materials for this timeout model are also in English. And timeout is this method of constructive discussion, which means dialogue in this case, and the basic core of timeout are the timeout rules. And these rules are just a way that is used to help people who come together to agree how we are going to talk in this situation in order to make it a dialogue. And there's only 6 rules. They are quite common sense. So I think dialogue is not a rocket science in that sort of sense. The first rule is that we start by listening what other people are saying, and we don't interrupt when somebody's talking. We try to join like what other people are saying. So we are not just always giving our own monologues, but we are saying that, okay, Riitta, when you said this is what came to my mind. It might be that I'm disagreeing with Riitta, but I'm kind of trying to join it to what other people have said. So we are joining, and we are trying to use everyday language, so everybody understands what we are saying. This is obviously a big problem when we are having discussions where they're like professionals or politicians and ordinary citizens, that if we are not using everyday language, it's difficult for everybody to participate. And then in a timeout dialogue, we talk about our own experiences. We are not trying to kind of give general opinions or general truths about things. We are telling how we see things, how we experience things. And we are asking other people to do the same. So it's very, very, this is how I see the thing, these are the reasons why I think this way. So what is yours? I'm interested in hearing your experiences also. Then we also ask questions, we address each other. So if I want to understand Riitta's point of view much better, I'm like, hey Riitta, please tell me, I didn't quite understand what you meant by this. Explain me more. And of course, we need to be present and respect the atmosphere of the dialogue. Especially this is very important in many cases because we are so addicted to our smartphones and lots of other distracting things. So we really need to be present if we want to understand each other and learn from each other. And then we try to search and build. We try to, if there's a conflict or differences in opinion, we are not solving them, but we are working on them. We are kind of trying to understand, okay, what's behind this? And in a dialogue, we don't have to agree, but we try to understand better why we disagree, for example. And also, we try to look what's hidden, what has not been said yet. And very often this means that, as we know in many discussions, some people, for example, have not said anything yet. But in a dialogue, we usually try to say that, okay, hey, I haven't heard from your point of view yet. Please tell us, what are you thinking? So we kind of actively also try to make the discussion more richer and broader than it otherwise would have been. So this is the kind of a practical side. And these rules are based on our very long work on dialogue with different groups and communities and with different professionals and ordinary citizens also. But they also have I assume, at least in my understanding, there's kind of a strong research background behind these very practical rules. We know that these seem to be those kind of principles that really help people to be in a dialogue instead of just arguing with each other. And the timeout method, or the timeout concept, as they call it in the Finnish Innovation Fund, also includes other materials. We have cards for the facilitator of the dialogue, how to start the dialogue, how to make the dialogue go deeper, how to deal with difficult situations in the dialogue, how to end it in a good way. And then we have many other materials, how to plan good dialogue, how to invite people to dialogues. So there's lots of materials for those people who want to promote and start dialogues in whatever situation in their life. And for some reason, this has now become quite widespread, as I said, in Finland. And for the last couple of months, for example, we have had many different topics that we have dealt with this timeout method, and this will be one of my final slides. Just to give an example, what are the different topics that timeout dialogue has been used? So we have been talking about marginalization in the society, about climate change, employment opportunities, child protection. This is a common theme in the Finnish society now, especially arranged by the Timeout Foundation, that we talk about what it means to be a Finn now when we have a multicultural society, and other very many different themes, also very technical things, fusion power. I'm constantly this autumn having dialogues about how to make the heating system of the whole city of Helsinki carbon neutral, which is a very complex and heated topic. So basically, there are lots of different ways and lots of different topics. And so far, and this is only the timeout numbers, but the Timeout Foundation tries to keep track on how much people are having these dialogues. So at the moment, we are at least had 50,000 people participating in timeout dialogues, and around 300 organizations that are somehow using the timeout model in their work. Okay, I think this is my basic input to you this afternoon. We have 10 minutes left to discuss something. So please, again, turn to somebody close to you or write something down. What's in your mind at the moment? What do you think about this idea of dialogue or these timeout rules or whatever? How do you see its relevance, or do you have some sort of other ideas or disagreements? So, some thoughts about dialogue and timeout. Couple of minutes, discuss with each other. 2 minutes, then we'll discuss together. Okay, finish your sentences. And let's spend the last 5 to 7 minutes having a small discussion in the end. What were you thinking? Some comments, some ideas? Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good question, and I think it's also something we thought quite a lot when we were creating the timeout model, is that when people are invited to dialogues, I think it's very important that they are also told what is the purpose of the discussion, and is there going to be some sort of impact. And I think there are several possibilities. One is just that, okay, we just want to hear from you so we know what you're thinking, but we will make the decisions anyway. Or then there is a quite common practice now in many cases. For example, in Finland at the moment, the government is using the timeout model in order, when they're preparing new laws and regulations, they arrange dialogues so that they can use the information to make the laws and regulations better. So, and of course, even then the people, of course, they have to know that it's not necessarily so that their opinions and their point of view affect the laws, but there's the possibility at least. So I think in the dialogical situation, in the dialogical discussion, it's important that we don't make decisions there, because if we start to make decisions there, we don't usually listen so well at each other. But it might be so that the same group first decides to have a dialogue, and then the same group, for example, starts to make decisions. And this is something that you can do on almost any meeting, for example. If you are with a group of people who can make the decisions, you can first have the dialogue. Okay, let's have a small discussion how we understand this thing, how each other's points of view, and then, okay, now we had the dialogue, let's start to talk about the decisions. So I think there are like different ways to use dialogue as part of various processes in groups and communities and in the society. But I think it's very important that people know what happens, as you said, what happens after the dialogue. And for example, when we had these national dialogues about the COVID situation, those dialogues are only providing information that we then make public, and the Finnish government has used that information to be one source of information for their decision making. But people know when they come to those dialogues that there will be notes made of those dialogues, and they are provided for people who write summaries, and they will be publicly published online. They're also in English. You can check them. I can put that webpage to those slides. But that's all. It's just about knowing better what people are experiencing at that moment. But it's very, very important that people know what happens afterwards, how this dialogue is used. And sometimes it can be okay that it's not used for anything. It's just to come together that everybody can just gain a better understanding and then go home. That's also okay, but there are lots of different possibilities. What else? What else you were discussing or talking? Yeah. I'm not sure, did I understand? Can you repeat the question? Yeah. So you mean that how can one help people to go to dialogue and kind of remain in dialogue? Agree. Yeah. Well, I think in general one of the reason why we created these rules was this because we understood that if people just come together and somebody says, let's have a dialogue, everybody doesn't understand what it means. So one way of inviting people and trying to create the dialogical discussion is to have some sort of a agreement on the rules. And it doesn't necessarily need to be all these, or it can be something else also. But I think it comes from this, as I mentioned before, that one of the problems is that because most of us haven't learned to have dialogues in our primary education or in our workplaces. So when we come together and even we would like to have a good discussion, we need something to help us to share the same idea about the discussion that we're having. And of course, if somebody doesn't want to be in a dialogue, you can't force people. So it's also something that has to be acknowledged, that people need to be willing to have this kind of discussion. And I've never been in a situation where I have said something about these rules or similar rules, where I have been the person who invites people or who is the facilitator of the dialogical discussion, where somebody has said that I don't accept this kind of way of having discussion. But of course, there are lots of situations where people, for some reason or another, don't maintain within the spirit of dialogue. And then, of course, you need to do something if you are the person who is guiding the dialogue. And part of the timeout material is these cards for facilitating discussion, where you can have some sort of ideas how to deal with when somebody is having a really strong emotions, or when somebody is talking too much and nobody else is giving the speech and something like that. So I think it's there are many ways to kind of make dialogue happen. Did I reply your question at all? Okay. Okay, we would have time for one more question or comment. Yes, please. Mm.
Not because people don't have anything to say, because usually teenagers do have pretty strong opinions.
Yeah.
But when we are at school, at least this is my experience, I'm Italian, so I only have the experience of Italian and partly German high school. But especially in Italy, when we are in school, most people fall silent. And I really cannot understand why is that.
Yeah.
Do they feel like it's not worth to share their opinion? Do they feel like they're not listened to? Do they feel like it's not of their interest what is being discussed? What is, in your opinion, the reason behind this sudden silence of young people in classrooms?
I think, and my experiences are obviously mostly from Finland, but also from some other countries. You said that you are from Italy. I will go tomorrow to Brescia to teach teachers in Timeout. I have had very interesting discussions with them about the Italian schools also. I think, and in Finland also, in work life, I work with different professionals. There are lots of people who never say in discussions what they think. And they don't, and I think my understanding is the reason that somehow so many of us have had the experience already in childhood or when we are young that people don't really care. That when you have several experiences that, okay, I try to say something, I kind of try to express something, but nobody cares. Then for many people, they start just participating. And I think it takes time to change that. And I think the only way to do it is just try again and again. Okay, Rita, again, tell me something more. That you kind of try to encourage people to and of course you need to be honest, like, okay, I am interested at your opinion. And of course it doesn't need to be anything spectacular, it's enough that it's yours, because you belong to this community. And I completely agree that this should happen in schools, and hopefully very early on. And we actually do have a fantastic example from Italy. There was this one school in Brescia where they had this kind of a dialogical pedagogy. And my friend in Finland made her dissertation on that school. And that was small children, like a primary school. And I think it is, if we would do that constantly, already from the kindergarten all the way to the high school, I think children and young people, when they start to learn dialogue, they learn it actually quite quickly. I think it's like people of my age who have much more difficulties, because we need to unlearn so many things. And our whole education system in all Western countries is based that you are trained to kind of know things instead of ask and listen and be uncertain and question and do those things. So it kind of goes so much against what we are actually taught to do in even the many good schools. So I think, and again, of course, we need to know, and we need that other form too, but we kind of, if we don't have the dialogical approach combined to that, we lose those skills in our life. Because I think for children it's quite natural to be curious and engage and be active and open to other people. But then it kind of slowly, for many people, starts to go away, and it really takes time to kind of reactivate that. And definitely it should happen in high school, but also I think in kindergarten. Okay, this was my presentation. It's been a great pleasure, a great honor to visit your school, and I hope that this might create some good dialogues for you also in the future. Thank you.